On today's Newsmakers, I'm joined by Cara Kernodle, who joins us to discuss her daughter, Xana, who was murdered November 13th, 2022, alongside 3 other University of Idaho students. She joins us to talk about her journey through grief, finding Christianity in the wake of it, and so much more. Cara has an incredible testimony of overcoming addiction and finding forgiveness. Now, this conversation was recorded about a week before Cara and other victims' family members went before a courtroom, and at Bryan Kohberger, the convicted killer's sentencing, they addressed him directly. Cara forgave him to his face. It was a very moving story that you can read about over at CBN News and FaithWire, but I want you to hear Cara's journey, again recorded just days before her appearance in that courtroom. With no further ado, here is her story. Cara, I want to really just thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. I know this has not been an easy journey over the last couple of years, and there has been constant media attention. Most recently, Bryan Kohberger taking a plea deal, and in the midst of this, losing your daughter, and again having so much public attention. I want to get into your faith and into your journey and what this has been like. But I want to first start by talking about this plea deal. What was your initial reaction to it?
Oh, I was shocked. I was actually up camping with our church, so we didn't have cell service. I had got the information because a friend of mine had gone up the mountain to check his messages where he could get a signal, and him and his wife had told me when he got back to our camp, and I was just very shocked and confused. Because here we had this man who was proclaiming his innocence this whole time. So there's been a lot of questions surrounding the case this whole time. A lot of unanswered questions. It's been very confusing, and that alone I know is not of the Lord. So it's been very hard for me to just focus on the Lord, but I have. But when I found out, my initial reaction was a little bit angry, because I just felt like it was just too easy for him to just admit that he did it and not have to give an explanation or answer our questions. And here we have been planning on going to this trial, and that's not something you look forward to.
Yeah.
But I think that all of us were wanting answers, and so the trial maybe was going to answer some questions. And so you feel kind of cheated.
Yeah.
So that was my initial reaction. But I know that the Lord had me right where I should be, around my church family, and my pastor was up there. One of my pastors, John Padula, was up there, and him and his wife came around me and prayed for me. And my church family was able to pray over me. And the Lord is just so good in helping me to understand that it's okay that I don't know everything. And that likely is for my protection. So I may never know all the answers that I want. I may never know. And I know now that that is God's protection, and that even if I were to know why he did it or all the details, what is it going to change? Is it going to make me feel better? No. It's a senseless crime to take my beautiful daughter's life and her friends. And the more information we find out, the more questions we have. And there's never going to be a good enough reason for why it happened. There's never going to be a good reason for that. So I believe that if we are supposed to know, we will know.
And seeing, I
And
mean, the way that you spoke about this in other interviews, seeing the blessing in the midst of that, right? Coming to a place of understanding that protection you just talked about, um, as a parent, I can't imagine what you've been through, right? But what you're saying is so true. It doesn't change the end result, but if you are meant to know that, God will reveal that to you. You will find out if you're meant to know it. How have you navigated? I mean, you talked about your faith and being with your church community when this news came down recently. When you go back to when this first happened, where was your faith then? Where is your faith now? How has it sustained you through the unthinkable?
I mean, when it happened, I was in a bad place. And bad went to worse after it happened. I wish I could say that that was my aha moment, that is when I ran towards Christ, but I ran towards drugs and alcohol instead, and ended up getting to a place where I knew that I was either going to die living the way that I was, or I could draw close to Jesus and surrender and change my life and hopefully be able to show others Christ through this trauma that I've experienced, and the Lord is walking me through. But I can't say enough how much the Lord has changed my life and how much peace He has given me through all of this. It's a constant battle. We battle against, not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual powers, spiritual wickedness. So when you really look at that and understand that this is a spiritual battle we're fighting, it really
Ephesians
helps
6.
to
Ephesians 6, right? It tells
Ephesians
us right in
6, yes,
Ephesians 6. Yeah,
the armor of God,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Um,
Can I ask you how long? So when Xana died, how long was it after that? You talked about going to this dark place that you did start running towards Jesus, and what was it that caused you to make that change? Because I think it's understandable that you would struggle in that way after such a horrific incident. But what was the time frame there? How long was it before you did find Christ?
I think it was about a year, a little over a year. Um, and I was arrested, and I had to spend time in jail for 10 months. Um,
Wow.
and after that, uh, I actually turned my life over to the Lord in a jail cell.
Wow.
Um, but I can't explain it. Once I did that, it was like I was free. I was just filled with such joy and peace when I finally surrendered to God and decided that I was going to fully surrender and do it His way and not mine anymore. Um, so I have a friend, Pastor Tim Remington, who has a faith based recovery here in town in Coeur d'Alene. And I've known him for about 20 years. I went through his program 20 years ago. Him and his wife and his family are just wonderful people, and they just have a true heart for the Lord and for helping people in recovery, getting out of addiction. So I contacted Pastor and asked him um, to be able to go through the program again. So when I was released, I went through his program, and it was 3 months. Um, and he has a ranch house out in the country where basically it's just a beautiful program where you are fed the word from sun up to sundown. every day, and with no distractions.
Wow.
So that was huge for my healing, for me to come to a place of healing and to begin forgiving. Um, and so it's been 18 months now. I've been completely sober. I do not smoke cigarettes. I don't take medication. I am
Thank God.
completely free of
Wow.
every bondage through
Wow.
Christ. And there's just no other answer for that except for Jesus.
Wow. I mean, I didn't know all of this about your backstory, right? When I reached out to you and we talked about doing this interview, I didn't know all of those struggles. I knew that you had been on a national stage because of what had happened to your daughter and this horrific story and that backdrop of everything you were going through, just to sort of ask you, before Xana's death, before these murders, were you struggling? Were these things, it sounds like that these were things that you did struggle with at different points throughout your life. And
Yes.
were you in the faith before in any way? Were you going to church? Even though you were in those struggles before all of this, what was your spiritual life like beforehand?
It wasn't very good.
Yeah.
I was raised in church, but um, I had fallen away from the Lord for many years and chose to live in my own way. So there, I had my ups and downs where I went to church and thought I was doing good, but I was always holding on to something of the world. I was never completely surrendering to the Lord. Um, and I really believe that it just has to come to a place in your life where you're willing to just stop doing it your way and surrender fully to the Lord. Um, his way is so much better, and it truly is freeing. I think people get scared when they think of recovery or they think of surrendering everything to the Lord because we want to hold on to those things, to our anger, to our bitterness, to our addictions. And that's the enemy. We get comfortable in our sin or in our feelings, and the Lord just wants to take them from us, and he wants to fill us with his peace and his love, and it's truly freedom. That's freedom.
Well, and when you found out this news, when this horrible event happened, and it made national news immediately. So this, I can't emphasize this enough for people who don't understand. When there's a trauma, losing a child is the most traumatic thing that can happen to somebody. Having it be a murder, then having it be a national news story. There's so many layers of that, and here you are, your face, and I can't speak for you, but hearing this story, it's very moving because as an individual who already is having these struggles, you're faced with a couple of different options, and you ran the other way, sort of, back deeper into these issues. But then you find Jesus in this jail cell. You talked about peace, you talked about forgiveness. Let's talk about the forgiveness piece, because here you have a situation where a person is claiming they're before this plea deal that they're innocent. You're not being given reasons. How have you dealt with forgiveness? How have you gotten to a place of forgiving somebody who hasn't asked for that forgiveness?
Because it's not for them. It's I'm sure he could probably care less if I forgive him. Um, it's not for him. Forgiveness, the Lord asks us to forgive, and he does that so that we don't have to hold on to that bitterness and that anger and that hate, because it will destroy you. Um, and it truly was destroying me. It doesn't excuse what he did in any way. It doesn't excuse his actions. What it does is it releases me from that bondage of bitterness and anger and hatred
Yeah.
that is not of the Lord. That's how the enemy wins. The enemy wins when we hold on to those things, because he got you right
Absolutely.
where he wants you at that point. So to forgive is that's the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And I promise you, it was nothing in me. It was all Jesus. I knew I had to surrender that. I knew I had to, in order to begin healing and to be forgiven of my sins.
Yeah. Yeah, the measure of how we forgive others, when the Bible talks about being, judged by that same measure, that's very convicting and very scary to think about, because a lot of times we don't forgive people. And when you're in a position like you have been in, you know, your life has been totally changed on so many different levels. And it's incredibly moving to hear you talk about your faith. What do you want people to know about your daughter? Because I feel like when these events happen, it's headlines in media, and people are being fed certain pieces of information and not the full story, and you lose the humanity of the person and the victims in the midst of that. What do you want people to know about her, and who she was and what she meant to you?
Xana was amazing. Anybody who knew her can see that. Even people who didn't know her can see that. She lit up a room. She was funny. She could make you laugh. Um, she had a way of making everybody around her feel important and special. She was a true gift from the Lord from day one. Um, she loved her siblings and her family. She was just a great, great girl. And she would have done amazing things. And she's missed terribly. And I regret not telling her more how much she meant to me. I regret not being present in her life more. But I know that the Lord holds her now. And I know I have that hope of seeing her again. And I know she's safe in his arms now. Too soon, but I
Absolutely.
know where she is. And
Yeah,
that's the best
absolutely.
comfort that I have.
When you think about the moment that you in your jail cell accepted the Lord and what came next for you, because here you are, a lot of people would not do any interviews, they wouldn't speak out, they wouldn't share, and that would be understandable. You're sharing very openly not only the most traumatic event that has happened to you, your love for your daughter, and you're sharing your own journey, which is not easy to share. What has led you to be willing to do that and to so openly share that moment you had in the jail cell all the way through to this faith journey that you've been on now?
Jesus, because people need to know that it is possible with Jesus to overcome addiction in the worst circumstances. And I'm proof of that. If I can just help one person see that no matter what you're going through, no matter what, it doesn't matter what your circumstances are, the Lord will, He will redeem you. He will break all those strongholds if you allow Him to. If you just surrender to Him, if you just give it to Him, He will walk you through anything. I used to think that wasn't possible. I would hear stories of people having radical changes in their life. And I used to think that's just never going to happen to me. I just thought it was like a fairy tale. But when it did, in the darkest time in my life, after my daughter had been murdered, and then I'm sitting in a jail. And I mean, life just couldn't get any worse at that point for me. I was so broken, and how the Lord can take you when you're so broken and make you whole again. So that's just what I want to share. I just want to share that with the world. And it is hard. It's not something that, you know, this platform isn't something anybody ever asks for or wants. But if I can share Jesus with others through it, then that's what makes it worth it. Because I just want others to know how much Christ loves them. He's not a respecter of persons. It's not just for me. He can do this for anybody, no matter what your circumstances are. So that's what I would like people to know.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing, because I didn't know that we would go into so much depth in your story, and I'm really glad that we did. I think you're incredibly brave on so many levels. I think it's incredibly difficult to change your life, but anything is possible with Jesus. And just as you're saying, it is so true. It's incredibly difficult to forgive. Anything is possible with Jesus, especially when you've gone through what you have gone through. And you getting on here and sharing your story and being so vulnerable so that you can help other people. There are people out there listening or watching right now, whether it's them or it's a relative, a loved one, a friend, who are going through what you were. I just thank you for sharing about your daughter. And, I guess the final thing I will ask you, what is next now? Because this plea deal is there, this opportunity for peace. What's next in your life when it comes to this chapter? Is this chapter now closed? Do you move forward? What happens next for you and your family?
Well, I pray for restoration in my family. Number one. Also, I just want to share, I want to keep sharing my story, Xana's story, because it's so profound what Christ is doing. And he's not done yet. He will be glorified in all of this. And I believe in a lot of ways he already is. So if I can just keep sharing what the Lord has done in my life so that I can help others who are caught in bondage of addiction or bitterness or unforgiveness or any of those things that we hold on to that keep us from Christ. And I just want to help people get to know who their Savior is. If I can just point them to Christ.
Well, I love that. And you're doing a beautiful job of doing that by sharing your story. I appreciate you joining us today. That's all for today's Newsmakers. Make sure you head on over to the CBN News YouTube channel and cbnnews.com for more of the news you need to read. We'll see you again tomorrow.